In the forgotten corners of the American West, where dust settles heavier and hope comes harder, some stories write themselves in silence. This is one of those stories. It's about a 12-year-old girl named Lily who was left behind like an old wagon wheel, discarded, forgotten, deemed too broken to bother with. And it's about Sam Turner, a 67-year-old cowboy whose weathered hands had built more fences than most men cross in a lifetime. They found each other in 1889 in a small Nevada town where whispers carried further than prayers, and kindness was rationed like water in a drought. She sat outside the last building on Main Street, where the wooden sidewalk ended and the desert began. Her wheelchair, cobbled together from old cartwheels and scrap wood, creaked like a door that had forgotten how to welcome anyone home. The townspeople called her cursed, said a child who couldn't walk was a burden no family should bear, said she'd bring bad luck to anyone fool enough to get close. But Sam Turner had stopped listening to what people said a long time ago. And when he first saw her there, small hands gripping the armrests like they were the only things keeping her tethered to the world, something in his chest shifted. Some storms destroy, others clear the path for something beautiful to grow. The morning sun painted the Nevada sky the color of old copper when Sam Turner first laid eyes on her. He'd been walking back from Henderson's general store, a sack of coffee beans slung over his shoulder, and his mind on the fence repair waiting at his ranch, when he saw the small figure hunched outside Murphy's abandoned saloon. At first glance, he thought it was just a pile of old clothes someone had discarded. The desert wind had a way of gathering forgotten things in corners, tumbling them together until you couldn't tell trash from treasure. But then the pile shifted, and he saw the glint of metal, wheels crude and mismatched, attached to what looked like a child's chair. Sam stopped walking. The girl couldn't have been more than 12, maybe 13 at most. Her dark hair hung in tangles around a face that was too thin, too pale, marked by the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying burdens too heavy for small shoulders. Her dress, once blue perhaps, had faded to the color of old bruises, patched and repatched until the original fabric was more memory than reality. She was alone. Completely, utterly alone. "Morning," Sam said quietly, setting down his coffee beans and removing his hat. The girl's head snapped up, brown eyes wide with the startled wariness of a wild animal. She didn't speak, just stared at him like she was trying to decide if he was real or just another desert mirage sent to torment her. Sam didn't move closer. Instead, he crouched down where he was, bringing himself to her eye level. His knees protested. 67 years of ranch work had left their mark, but he ignored the ache. "I'm Sam," he said, his voice as gentle as morning rain. "Sam Turner. I've got a place just outside town." Still no response. The girl's hands tightened on her wheelchair's armrest, knuckles white against the weathered wood. Sam noticed her fingernails were bitten down to the quick, and there were rope burns around her wrists, faded now but unmistakable. "You got a name?" he asked. She shook her head quickly, then immediately looked down at her lap as if the simple gesture had cost her something precious. Sam studied her face. Beneath the dirt and exhaustion, he saw intelligence in those brown eyes. Fear, yes, but also a spark of something that hadn't been completely extinguished. She was waiting for him to leave, he realized, waiting for him to lose interest and walk away like everyone else had. Instead, he settled more comfortably on his haunches. "Well," he said conversationally, "I reckon we all got names whether we share 'em or not. Mine's Samuel Turner, but folks call me Sam. Been working horses and cattle since before you were born, I'd wager. Got a little spread about 2 miles north of here. Nothing fancy, but it's honest work." The girl's eyes flickered up to his face, then away again. But she was listening. Sam could tell by the way her breathing had steadied, the way her shoulders had loosened just a fraction. "Been living alone out there for, must be going on 15 years now," he continued, reaching for his water canteen. "Wife passed in 74. Fever took her quick. We never had children of our own, but she always said this place could use the sound of young laughter." He took a slow sip of water, then held the canteen out toward her. "You thirsty?" The girl stared at the offered water like it might be poison. Her lips were cracked, her skin dry as old leather. When had she last had a proper drink? A proper meal? "It's clean," Sam said gently. Got it from the well at Henderson's not an hour ago. After what felt like an eternity, she reached out with one trembling hand and took the canteen. She drank deeply, desperately, water running down her chin and onto her dress. When she handed it back, her eyes met his for the first time. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're welcome," Sam replied. "Now I know it ain't none of my business, but how long you been sitting out here?" She looked away again. "3 days," she said quietly. "Maybe 4. Hard to tell when the days all look the same." Sam's jaw tightened. 3 days. In the desert heat, with no shelter, no food, no water except what charity she might find. "Where's your family?" Something flickered across her face. Pain, anger, resignation. "Gone," she said simply. "Gone where?" "Just gone." She gestured vaguely toward the east. "Said they couldn't take care of someone like me anymore. Said I was too much trouble." The words hit Sam like a physical blow. He'd seen plenty of cruelty in his 67 years, but this was something else entirely. To abandon a child, any child, but especially one so vulnerable, it went against everything he believed about right and wrong. "What's your name?" he asked again, gentler this time. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then barely audible, "Lily." "Lily," Sam repeated as if testing the weight of it. "That's a pretty name. Suits you." For the first time since he'd approached her, Lily's mouth curved in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Tell you what, Lily," Sam said, standing slowly and brushing dust off his knees. "I got to head back to my place to tend to my horses. But I'll be coming back to town tomorrow morning for supplies. Maybe I'll see you here." She nodded quickly, hope flickering in her eyes like a candle flame in a gentle breeze. "Good," Sam said, settling his hat back on his head. "Real good." As he walked away, carrying his coffee beans and a heart that felt suddenly fuller and more broken than it had in years, Sam Turner made himself a promise. Tomorrow he'd be back, and maybe, just maybe, he'd figure out a way to make sure Lily never had to sit alone outside that abandoned saloon again. Behind him, the girl in the makeshift wheelchair watched until he disappeared around the corner, her small hands still warm from the touch of human kindness. Sam kept his word. The next morning, as the desert air still held the cool kiss of night, he appeared on Main Street carrying a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. Lily was exactly where he'd left her, though she looked even smaller in the early light, like a shadow the darkness had forgotten to take with it. She saw him coming from half a block away. Her spine straightened, and something that might have been anticipation replaced the resigned emptiness in her eyes. "Morning, Lily," Sam said, settling down on an overturned crate someone had left near the saloon steps. He didn't ask permission, didn't make a show of it, just sat down like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Morning, Mr. Turner," she replied, her voice still barely above a whisper. "Just Sam," he corrected gently, unwrapping his bundle. Inside were 3 things: a thick slice of cornbread, a hard-boiled egg, and a small jar of honey. "Figured you might be hungry." Lily stared at the food like she'd never seen such abundance. Her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl that made her cheeks flush pink with embarrassment. "When did you last eat?" Sam asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. "Day before yesterday," she admitted. "Mrs. Henderson gave me some bread scraps when her husband wasn't looking." Sam's hand stilled on the jar of honey. "Well," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "no sense letting good food go to waste." He handed her the cornbread first. Lily took it with both hands, holding it like it was made of gold. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, making it last. When she was finished, Sam offered her the egg and a small portion of honey to go with it. "My wife used to say honey makes everything better," he told her, watching as she carefully rationed each sweet drop. "Martha had quite the sweet tooth. Made the best apple pie in 3 counties." "What was she like?" Lily asked, then immediately looked startled that she'd spoken without being asked a direct question. Sam smiled. "Curious like someone else I know. Always asking questions, always wanting to know how things worked. She'd have liked you." They sat in comfortable silence while Lily finished eating. When she was done, Sam didn't immediately leave. Instead, he pulled out a small piece of wood and a pocket knife and began to whittle. his weathered hands moving with practiced ease. "What are you making?" Lily asked after watching him for several minutes. "Not sure yet," Sam replied, shaving off a thin curl of wood. "Sometimes you don't know what something's supposed to be until it tells you." Lily nodded as if this made perfect sense. She watched his hands work, mesmerized by the gentle, precise movements. Wood shavings collected at his feet like tiny golden prayers. "Can you teach me?" she asked suddenly, then bit her lip as if regretting the words. Sam looked up from his carving. "You want to learn to whittle?" She nodded eagerly, then caught herself and shrugged as if it didn't matter much either way. "Well," Sam said, "reckon I could teach you the basics, but not today. Need to get you a proper knife first, and maybe some softer wood to start with." "You do that?" The hope in her voice nearly broke his heart. "Course I would. Everyone should know how to make something with their hands." That afternoon, Sam left Lily with a promise to return the next day. True to his word, he appeared the following morning with a small, child-sized whittling knife and a piece of soft pine wood. "Now," he said, settling beside her on his crate, "first thing about whittling is patience. You can't rush it and you can't force it. The wood will tell you where it wants to go." For the next hour, he guided her small hands, showing her how to hold the knife, how to make controlled cuts away from her body, how to work with the grain instead of against it. Lily was a quick learner, her fingers nimble despite the weeks of neglect. "You've got good hands for this," Sam observed as she carefully shaped what was beginning to look like a small bird. "Really?" Lily's face lit up with the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "Really? Martha would have said you've got artist hands." From that day forward, Sam established a routine. Every morning, just after sunrise, he'd appear on Main Street with breakfast for Lily and work for his hands. Sometimes they whittled together in comfortable silence. Sometimes he told her stories about his ranch, about the horses he'd trained, about the time a particularly stubborn calf had chased him up a tree and left him stranded there for 3 hours. Lily began to open up slowly, like a flower turning toward the sun. She told him about her life before, how she'd been born with legs that didn't work properly, how her parents had kept her hidden away from the world, how they'd eventually decided she was too much trouble and had brought her to town with nothing but the makeshift wheelchair and the clothes on her back. "They said someone would take me in," she whispered one morning, her fingers working automatically on a piece of wood that was becoming a small horse. "Said there were people who took care of children like me." Sam's knife stilled in his hand. "Been anyone come asking about taking you in?" Lily shook her head. "People look, but they don't see me. Not really. They see the chair and walk away." "Well," Sam said carefully, "their loss is their own foolishness." The townspeople noticed Sam's daily visits, of course. In a place where everyone knew everyone else's business, a cowboy spending time with the abandoned crippled girl was bound to draw attention. Sam heard the whispers, caught the sideways glances, felt the weight of judgment following him down Main Street. "That old fool's gone soft," he heard Murphy say to Henderson one afternoon. "Waste of time," Henderson agreed. "Girl's got nothing to offer. Can't work, can't marry, can't do nothing useful." Sam kept walking, his jaw set, his hands steady on the supplies he was carrying to Lily. Let them talk. He'd stopped caring what small minds thought about big hearts a long time ago. But Lily heard the whispers too. One morning she was quieter than usual, her movements listless, her usual curiosity dimmed. "Something troubling you?" Sam asked. She was quiet for a long moment, then, "People say you shouldn't waste your time on me." Sam set down his whittling and looked at her directly. "Lily, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "Time spent with someone who matters to you is never wasted. You understand me?" She nodded, tears threatening to spill over. "Good," Sam said firmly. "Now how about we work on that horse of yours? Looks like he's ready for a mane." 3 weeks into their morning ritual, everything changed. Sam arrived at his usual time to find Lily's crate empty. For a heart-stopping moment, he thought she was gone, that someone had taken her away in the night, or worse, that she'd tried to leave on her own and gotten lost in the desert. Then he heard it, a small, choked sob coming from behind the saloon. Sam found her huddled against the back wall of the building, her wheelchair tipped on its side, one wheel spinning lazily in the morning breeze. Lily was on the ground, her dress torn, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Her carefully crafted wooden bird lay broken in pieces beside her. What happened? Sam knelt beside her, his voice tight with controlled anger. Lily couldn't speak through her tears, could only point toward the main street where the sound of boys' laughter was fading into the distance. Sam didn't need an explanation. The scene told its own story. Boys being boys, they'd probably say if confronted. Just having a little fun with the crippled girl. No harm meant. Are you hurt? Sam asked gently, checking her arms and legs for injuries. Lily shook her head, but kept crying. They said I was cursed. Said I'd make the whole town sick if I kept sitting there. They pushed me over and she gestured helplessly at the broken pieces of her wooden bird. Sam's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained calm. What did they look like? Sam, no. Lily grabbed his arm with surprising strength. Please don't. It'll just make things worse for me. The old cowboy looked into her frightened eyes and saw something that made his chest tight. She wasn't just scared of the boys. She was scared of being abandoned again, scared that if he caused trouble on her behalf, he might decide she wasn't worth the effort. All right, he said softly. But this stops here. You understand? No one treats you that way. Not while I'm around. He righted her wheelchair, checking the wheels and frame for damage. One of the wheels was bent, the axle slightly off kilter. It would need repair. Can you get back in? He asked. Lily nodded, though it took some maneuvering. Sam helped support her weight as she lifted herself back into the chair. The bent wheel made the chair pull to one side, but it was still functional. We're going to fix this, Sam said, examining the damage more closely. But first, let's get you cleaned up. For the first time since he'd known her, Lily looked directly at him. Really looked, as if she was seeing him for the first time. Why? She asked. Why what? Why do you keep coming back? Why do you care what happens to me? Sam was quiet for a long moment, collecting the pieces of the broken bird and wrapping them carefully in his handkerchief. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. I had a daughter once, he said quietly. Martha was carrying when she took sick. Lost them both at the same week. Lily's eyes widened. I'm sorry. That was a long time ago, Sam continued, but I always wondered what she would have been like. Would she have been curious like Martha? Would she have liked to make things with her hands? Would she have asked 1,000 questions a day and never been satisfied with simple answers? He looked at Lily, this small, broken girl who had somehow worked her way past all his carefully constructed walls. Then I met you, he said simply, and I figure maybe this is the universe giving me a second chance to get it right. Lily was crying again, but softer now, not from pain or fear, but from something deeper, something that felt dangerously close to hope. I don't know how to be anyone's daughter, she whispered, and I don't know how to be anyone's father, Sam replied. Guess we'll have to figure it out together. That afternoon, Sam didn't leave Lily at the saloon. Instead, he carefully pushed her wheelchair to his wagon, helped her into the seat beside him, and loaded the chair into the back. Where are we going? She asked as they rolled out of town. Home, Sam said simply. The Turner Ranch was modest, a small wooden house, a barn, a corral with 3 horses, and enough land to graze a small herd of cattle. It wasn't much to look at, but it was clean and well-maintained, with the kind of careful attention that spoke of love rather than obligation. It's beautiful, Lily breathed, looking around with wide eyes. Sam helped her back into her wheelchair and pushed her up the wooden ramp he'd built years ago, when Martha's arthritis had made the front steps difficult for her to navigate. Inside, the house was simple but comfortable. The main room held a stone fireplace, a wooden table, 2 chairs, and shelves lined with books. Sunlight streamed through clean windows, highlighting dust motes that danced like tiny spirits in the air. This was Martha's favorite spot, Sam said, wheeling Lily to a window that looked out over the valley. She used to sit here in the evenings, reading or sewing, watching the sunset. It's perfect, Lily said softly. Sam spent the rest of the day showing her around the property, introducing her to his horses, a gentle mare named Rose, a spirited gelding called Thunder, and an old stallion named Duke who'd been with him for 15 years. Rose is the sweet one, Sam explained as the mare nuzzled Lily's palm, looking for treats. Thunder's got spirit but a good heart. And Duke, well, Duke's like me, old, stubborn, and set in his ways. For the first time since Sam had known her, Lily laughed. A real laugh, bright and clear as spring water. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the mountains, Lily asked the question that had been building in her chest all day. Can I stay? Sam was quiet for a long moment, rocking slowly in his chair. When he spoke, his voice was certain. Lily, girl, I was hoping you'd ask. Word traveled fast in a small town. By the time Sam and Lily made their next trip into town for supplies, everyone knew that old Sam Turner had taken in the crippled girl. The whispers followed them down Main Street like tumbleweeds in a dust storm. Heard Turner's lost his mind completely now. That girl's bad luck. Mark my words. What's an old bachelor want with a crippled child anyway? Sam kept his face impassive, his hands steady on the back of Lily's wheelchair as they navigated the wooden sidewalk. But Lily heard every word, felt every stare, and shrank deeper into herself with each whispered comment. They'd made it to Henderson's general store when trouble found them in the form of Mayor Clayton Morse, a soft-bodied man with hard opinions and a voice that carried 3 blocks in any direction. Turner, Morse called out, his substantial frame filling the doorway of the store. Need to have a word with you. Sam didn't stop pushing Lily's chair. Morning, Clayton. If you'll excuse us, we've got shopping to do. This won't take but a minute. Morse stepped sideways, blocking their path. It's about the girl. What about her? Well, it's just... Morse glanced around at the small crowd that had gathered, drawn by the promise of conflict like flies to honey. The town council's been talking, and we're concerned about the situation. What situation would that be? Sam's voice was deceptively calm. An unmarried man taking in a young girl. It doesn't look proper, Sam. People are talking. Sam felt Lily's shoulders tense beneath his hands. Let them talk. It's not that simple. Morse was warming to his subject now, playing to his audience. We have a responsibility to the community, to maintain certain standards. Standards, Sam repeated flatly. Yes, standards. And frankly, what you're doing, well, it raises questions. Questions about your motives. The crowd murmured agreement. Someone in the back called out, Girls cursed anyway. Bad luck to the whole town. Sam felt something cold and dangerous settle in his chest. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. Clayton, I'm going to say this once, and I want everyone here to listen real careful. He looked around at the gathered faces, meeting each gaze steadily. That little girl has been through more hardship in her 12 years than most of you will see in a lifetime. She's been abandoned, mistreated, and left to die in the desert heat. If you think I'm going to let small minds and smaller hearts run her out of the only home she's known since her family threw her away like garbage, you're badly mistaken. Now see here, Morse began. I'm not finished. Sam's voice cut through the mayor's bluster like a knife through butter. Any man who has a problem with me giving a child food, shelter, and kindness is welcome to discuss it with me privately. But if anyone hurts that girl or makes her feel unwelcome in this town, they'll answer to me, and I guarantee you won't like that conversation. The crowd shifted uneasily. Sam Turner might be 67 years old, but he was still 6 feet of solid muscle and bone, with hands that could gentle a horse or break a man's jaw with equal ease. Furthermore, Sam continued, anyone who wants to question my motives is welcome to speak to Reverend Mitchell. He'll be happy to explain the paperwork I've already filed to make Lily my legal ward. Everything proper and above board, just like you like it. Mayor Morse's face had gone red, then pale. You've adopted her? I've started the process, yes. Judge Morrison's handling it. Should be finalized within the month. The murmur that went through the crowd was different now. Surprised, uncertain. Adoption was legal, respectable, even admirable. It made their whispered accusations seem petty and mean-spirited. Well, Morse blustered, that's different then. But still, the girl, The girl, Sam said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet, has a name. It's Lily, and she's my daughter now. Anyone who has a problem with that is free to take it up with me. He pushed Lily's wheelchair forward, and this time Morse stepped aside. Inside Henderson's store, the silence was deafening. Mrs. Henderson bustled around behind the counter, her face carefully neutral, while her husband retreated to the back room rather than deal with the situation. "The usual?" Mrs. Henderson asked, her voice determinedly cheerful. "Yes, ma'am," Sam replied, "and we'll need some fabric. Something blue if you have it. Pretty enough for a young lady's dress." Mrs. Henderson's expression softened slightly. "I've got a lovely blue cotton that just came in. Bring out those brown eyes real nice." As they collected their supplies, other customers gave them a wide berth. Some stared openly, others pretended to be absorbed in their shopping while stealing glances at Lily. But not everyone was hostile. As they were loading their wagon, a woman Sam barely knew approached them. She was young, maybe 25, with kind eyes and work-roughened hands. "Mr. Turner," she said hesitantly, "I'm Sarah Mitchell, the Reverend's daughter. I just wanted to say, what you're doing is right. Christian, that little girl deserves love and kindness." She knelt down beside Lily's wheelchair, bringing herself to the girl's eye level. "Hello, Lily. I'm Sarah. If you ever need anything, a woman's help, someone to talk to, you come find me, all right?" Lily nodded shyly, the first genuine smile Sam had seen from her all day crossing her face. "Thank you," Lily whispered. Sarah stood and turned to Sam. "My father would be happy to speak on your behalf if anyone gives you trouble about the adoption." "I appreciate that," Sam said. As they drove home, Lily was unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke. "Do you really mean it? About adopting me?" Sam glanced over at her. "Filed the papers yesterday. Should be official in a few weeks. Even though people talk. Especially because people talk." Sam's jaw was set. "You're my daughter now, Lily. That means I protect you, provide for you, and love you, no matter what anyone else thinks about it." Lily was quiet for the rest of the ride home. But when Sam helped her down from the wagon, she threw her thin arms around his waist and held on tight. "Thank you, Papa," she whispered. It was the first time she'd called him that, and Sam felt his throat close up with emotion. He hugged her back, careful of her small frame, and knew that whatever battles lay ahead, they'd face them together. The official adoption papers arrived on a Tuesday morning in late October, carried by Judge Morrison himself, who made the hour-long ride from Carson City to deliver them personally. Sam read them twice, then handed them to Lily, who traced her finger over her new legal name, Lily Turner. "It's official now," Sam said, his voice gruff with emotion. "You're stuck with me." "And you're stuck with me," Lily replied, grinning. Judge Morrison, a kindly man with silver hair and laugh lines around his eyes, stayed for coffee and cake that Lily had insisted on making to celebrate. As he prepared to leave, he pulled Sam aside. "You know there are still people talking," he said quietly. "Not everyone's happy about this arrangement." "Let them talk," Sam replied. "Papers are signed, legal and binding. There's nothing they can do about it now. Just be careful, Sam. Small minds can do big damage when they set their hearts to it." After the judge left, Sam found Lily on the front porch, staring out at the valley with a thoughtful expression. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "I was thinking about the tree," she said, pointing to a massive oak that stood halfway between the house and the barn. "It's perfect for a tree house, isn't it?" Sam followed her gaze. The oak was indeed magnificent, ancient, sturdy, with branches that spread out like welcoming arms about 12 feet off the ground. "You want a tree house?" he asked. Lily nodded eagerly. "I've never had one, never had a tree to put one in, and I was thinking, even if I can't climb up to it the normal way, maybe we could figure something out." Sam studied the tree with the eye of a man who'd spent his life building things. "Reckon we could rig up some kind of pulley system. Get you up there safe and sound." "Really?" Lily's eyes lit up like stars. "Really, but it'll be a big project. Take us most of the winter to do it right." "I don't mind waiting," Lily said quickly. "I'm good at waiting." Something in her tone made Sam's chest tight. This girl had spent too much of her young life waiting for her parents to love her, waiting for someone to help her, waiting to feel like she belonged somewhere. "Well," he said, standing and brushing off his pants, "no sense waiting when we could be planning. Come on, let's take a closer look at that tree." They spent the afternoon circling the oak, discussing possibilities. Sam sketched rough plans in the dirt with a stick, while Lily offered suggestions and asked 100 questions about everything from load-bearing branches to roof angles. "It needs windows," she said decisively. "Big ones, so I can see everything." "Windows it is," Sam agreed. "What else?" "Bookshelves and a place to keep my whittling tools, and maybe room for a friend to visit, if I ever make one." Sam's throat tightened. "You'll make friends, honey. Good ones, who see what I see when I look at you." Work on the treehouse began the next Monday. Sam started with the platform, carefully measuring and cutting boards, checking and rechecking every angle. Lily sat nearby in her wheelchair, organizing nails by size, holding boards steady when needed, and offering a steady stream of commentary on his technique. "Shouldn't that board be a little longer?" she asked on the third day, studying his work with the critical eye of a born engineer. Sam paused, tape measure in hand, and checked her calculation. She was right. "Good catch," he said, smiling. "You've got a real eye for this." As the weeks passed, the treehouse began to take shape. Sam built a sturdy platform first, then added walls with the promised windows, 3 of them, facing different directions to catch the light at different times of day. The roof was angled just right to shed rain, but not block the view of the stars. The pulley system was Sam's proudest achievement. He rigged it so that Lily could wheel her chair onto a small platform at the base of the tree, secure herself with a safety harness, and pull herself up using a rope and pulley system that required only arm strength to operate. "It's like flying," Lily breathed the first time they tested it, her wheelchair platform rising smoothly toward the treehouse. "Better than flying," Sam called up to her. "You can land whenever you want." Word of the treehouse project spread through town, as news always did. Some folks thought Sam was spoiling the girl, giving her ideas above her station. Others wondered what possible use a crippled child could have for a treehouse she'd never be able to reach. They obviously hadn't seen Sam's pulley system in action. The criticism reached its peak when Mayor Morse made another unwelcome appearance at the ranch, this time accompanied by 2 other town council members. "Sam," Morse said, his voice dripping with false concern, "people are worried you're filling that girl's head with impossible dreams. It's cruel, really, to let her think she can do things she can't." Sam paused in his work. He was installing the treehouse door, and climbed down from his ladder. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "Clayton, I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to get off my property before I show you what impossible really looks like." "Now see here." 5 seconds, Sam continued, pulling off his work gloves with deliberate slowness. The town council members exchanged nervous glances. They'd heard stories about Sam Turner's temper, about what had happened to the last man who'd pushed him too far. They left without another word. That evening, as Sam and Lily sat on the porch planning the treehouse's interior, she asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. "Do you think they're right? That I'm dreaming too big?" Sam set down his coffee cup and looked at her seriously. "Lily, let me tell you something about dreams. People who don't have any will always try to convince you that yours are too big, too impossible, too much. You know why?" She shook her head. "Because seeing someone else reach for the stars reminds them that they never tried, and that makes them feel small." He reached over and squeezed her hand. "You dream as big as you want, little girl, and I'll be right here helping you build a ladder to reach them." 2 weeks later, the treehouse was finished. Lily christened it Sky Castle and invited Sam up for their first official tea party, served on mismatched cups and Martha's best china plates. Sitting 12 feet off the ground, surrounded by the whisper of oak leaves and the endless expanse of Nevada sky, Lily felt something she'd never experienced before, the feeling of being exactly where she belonged. "It's perfect," she said, pouring imaginary tea into Sam's cup. "Yes," Sam agreed, looking not at the view, but at the joy shining in his daughter's eyes. "It really is." Spring came early to the Turner Ranch in 1890, painting the valley in shades of green that seemed to shimmer with possibility. Lily had been with Sam for 8 months now, and the transformation in both of them was remarkable. The gaunt, frightened girl who'd been abandoned outside the saloon had blossomed into a confident 12-year-old with bright eyes and a quick laugh. And Sam, who'd spent 15 years living like a ghost in his own house, had rediscovered what it meant to have purpose beyond mere survival. The treehouse had become Lily's sanctuary. She spent hours there reading books Sam brought her from town, practicing her whittling, and working on her greatest project yet. A detailed carving of the ranch that showed every building, every fence post, every horse in miniature detail. "You planning to sell the place?" Sam teased one afternoon, examining her latest work. "No," Lily said seriously. "I'm making a map of home, so I never forget what it looks like." Her words hit Sam square in the chest. Home. Such a simple word, but one that carried the weight of everything they'd built together. That evening brought unexpected visitors. Sarah Mitchell arrived with her father, Reverend Mitchell, and a woman Sam didn't recognize. Middle-aged, well-dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Sam," Reverend Mitchell said, his usual warmth tempered by obvious discomfort. "This is Mrs. Victoria Hartwell from the Territorial Children's Aid Society. She's here about Lily." Sam felt his blood turn to ice. "What about Lily?" Mrs. Hartwell stepped forward, her smile as sharp as a blade. "Mr. Turner, I've received reports about your situation. Here, a single man raising a disabled girl, isolated from proper society and educational opportunities. The society feels it would be in the child's best interest to place her in a more appropriate environment." "And what environment would that be?" Sam's voice was dangerously quiet. "We have a lovely facility in San Francisco specifically designed for children with physical limitations. She would receive proper care, education, and be among others like herself." "An institution," Sam said flatly. "A specialized school," Mrs. Hartwell corrected, "with trained professionals who understand her needs." From the treehouse above them came the sound of Lily's pulley system engaging. She'd been listening, and now she was coming down to face whatever was happening. Sam watched his daughter maneuver her platform with practiced ease, her movements confident and sure. When she reached the ground and wheeled over to join them, her chin was raised and her eyes were blazing. "Are you here to take me away?" she asked Mrs. Hartwell directly. The woman's smile softened slightly. "We're here to discuss what's best for you, dear. You deserve opportunities this man can't provide." "What kind of opportunities?" Lily's voice was steady, but Sam could see her hands trembling slightly on her wheelchair's armrests. "Education with qualified teachers, medical care, social interaction with other children, a chance to learn skills that will make you self-sufficient." "I can read," Lily said quietly. "Sam taught me. I can do arithmetic and write letters and whittle and cook and take care of horses. I have friends in town now. Sarah visits me, and Mrs. Henderson always has a smile for me when we go shopping. And I have my treehouse and my books and my papa." She looked up at Sam with absolute trust. "I don't want to be anywhere else." Mrs. Hartwell's expression hardened. "Child, you don't understand what you're saying. This man isn't your father. You have no legal protection here, no guarantee of proper care." "Actually," Reverend Mitchell interjected, pulling a document from his coat, "she does. The adoption was finalized 6 months ago. Lily Turner is Sam's legal daughter, with all the rights and protections that entails." Mrs. Hartwell snatched the papers and read them quickly, her face growing red. "This is highly irregular. The society should have been consulted before any placement was made." "The society," Sam said, his temper finally beginning to show, "wasn't consulted because the society wasn't here when this child was dying in the desert heat, abandoned by everyone who should have cared for her. Where was the society when she needed food and water and basic human kindness?" "We can't be everywhere at once," Mrs. Hartwell snapped, "but we're here now, and I have the authority to investigate this situation thoroughly. If I find that the child is not receiving proper care, then you'll find a girl who's learned to read, write, and do mathematics," Sarah Mitchell interrupted, stepping forward, "who has gained 20 pounds and grown 3 inches since she's been here, who laughs every day and has never once been seen with so much as a bruise or a tear in her dress, who has a father who loves her more than his own life. Mrs. Hartwell looked around at the faces surrounding her, all united against her presence, all protective of the girl and the man who'd saved her. "I'll be watching," she said finally. "Any sign of neglect or impropriety, and I'll be back with a court order." After the visitors left, Sam and Lily sat in silence on the front porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. "Are you worried?" Lily asked finally. Sam considered his answer carefully. "I'm concerned that people who don't know you might try to make decisions about your life. But worried? Number, because I know something they don't." "What's that?" "I know that you're exactly where you belong. And I know that as long as there's breath in my body, no one's going to take you away from your home." Lily leaned against his arm, small and warm and trusting. "Promise?" "Promise." 6 months later, Mrs. Hartwell returned for her investigation. She found a girl who could recite poetry, solve complex arithmetic problems, and carve intricate wooden sculptures. She found a house filled with books and laughter, a tree house that defied every expectation about what disabled children could accomplish, and a bond between father and daughter that couldn't be questioned or quantified. She also found something she hadn't expected, a community that had rallied around Lily and Sam. Sarah Mitchell had started a small school that met 3 days a week in the church, with Lily as one of her star pupils. Mrs. Henderson had been teaching Lily to bake, and the girls' apple pies were already legendary among the church ladies. Even Mayor Morse, when pressed, admitted that the Turner girl had never caused a moment's trouble for anyone. Mrs. Hartwell left without a word, and they never saw her again. Years later, when Lily was grown and married to the young doctor who'd moved to town and fallen in love with her bright mind and brave heart, she would still climb up to the treehouse sometimes. She'd sit in the little room Sam had built for her and remember the day he'd first knelt down beside her wheelchair and treated her like she mattered. Sam lived to see her wedding, to hold his first grandchild, and to know that the little girl who'd been thrown away like garbage had grown into a woman who changed every life she touched. He died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 84, surrounded by the family he'd chosen and who had chosen him in return. They buried him beneath the oak tree, where the wind through the leaves sounded like the whisper of love that never dies. Some stories don't end with riding off into the sunset. The best ones end with finding home and staying there. Day after day, year after year, choosing love over convenience and family over blood. Sam Turner and Lily found each other in a world that had given up on both of them, and together they built something that lasted long after they were gone. Their story reminds us that heroes don't always wear badges or carry guns. Sometimes they're 67-year-old cowboys who know how to see worth where others see burden. Sometimes they're 12-year-old girls who refuse to let the world's limitations define their dreams. But here's what I want to know from you. Who was the Sam Turner in your life? Was there someone who saw potential in you when you couldn't see it yourself? Or maybe you've been the Sam Turner for someone else, offering hope to someone the world had written off? Share your stories in the comments below and tell us where you're watching from. Whether you're in Nevada like our heroes, somewhere else in the American West, or on the other side of the world, because stories like Sam and Lily's remind us that kindness knows no borders, and love builds the same bridges everywhere. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to remember that being different isn't being less, that every child deserves to dream big, and that the most important families are often the ones we choose. What would you build for someone you love? A treehouse, a new beginning, a chance to believe in themselves again? Let us know, because sometimes the most important construction projects happen not with wood and nails, but with patience, kindness, and the revolutionary idea that everyone deserves to belong somewhere. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey through the American frontier, where an old cowboy and a forgotten girl proved that home isn't a place. It's the people who refuse to give up on you. The burlap sack scratched against Charlotte's face with every bone-jarring jolt of the wagon. Rough hands had thrown her up like cargo 3 days ago, her wrists bound so tight the rope had carved grooves into her skin, ankles raw and bleeding from constant friction. The voices around her were nothing but cruel laughter and cold calculations, men discussing her like livestock, weighing her worth in dollars and damage. She'd stopped struggling hours ago, not from defeat, but from survival instinct honed sharp by weeks of captivity. They thought the sack made her easier to sell, less human, more commodity. "Can't see her face, can't feel sorry for her," one of them had muttered while loading her onto this final wagon. The auction yard in Dust Haven reeked of tobacco, horse sweat, and human desperation. Voices rose in lazy amusement around the wooden platform where she now stood, swaying slightly from exhaustion. "What's under the sack?" someone called out. "Hope she ain't too damaged for breeding?" More laughter rippled through the crowd like poison. Charlotte's stomach twisted as the auctioneer's practiced voice cut through the desert heat. $40, gentlemen. Young, strong, perfect for fieldwork. Breeding age, if that's your particular need. Do I hear 40? The bidding started fast and heartless. 45, 50, 55. A man near the front grunted, "I'll take her for 60 if she's the quiet type." Then a voice sliced through the crowd like thunder splitting sky. "That's my wife." Silence fell over the auction yard like a heavy curtain dropping on a stage. The gavel froze mid-air in the auctioneer's sweaty grip. Charlotte felt her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thought it might burst. "Who said that?" the auctioneer barked, his voice cracking slightly. Charlotte couldn't see through the coarse burlap, but every fiber of her being turned toward that voice. It was deep, steady, carrying the kind of authority that made men step aside on dusty streets. Footsteps approached the platform, measured, deliberate, unafraid. "I said that's my wife," the voice repeated, each word deliberate as a hammer strike against an anvil. "And I want her back." The auctioneer's nervous laugh echoed off the wooden buildings surrounding the yard. "Is that so, mister? Funny thing, she don't seem to recognize you through that sack." "She's been through hell," the stranger replied, his tone carrying an edge that made the crowd shuffle nervously. 3 weeks missing, stolen from our homestead while I was working the far pasture. Doesn't change who she is or who she belongs to." Charlotte's mind raced. She'd never heard this voice before in her life, didn't know this man from Adam, but something in his words whispered safety to her battered soul. Something in his confident lie felt more honest than any truth she'd heard in the longest, darkest weeks of her life. "Papers prove ownership, mister," the auctioneer said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier bluster. "You got any papers on this woman?" The stranger's boots clicked against the wooden platform as he stepped closer. Charlotte could smell leather and cedar, honest sweat and soap, clean scents that reminded her of a world beyond cages and ropes. "You want papers?" His voice carried the weight of a coming storm. "I'll bring you the man who forged the ones that put her here. He's standing in this crowd somewhere, probably sweating through his shirt right about now. I'd bet my ranch on it." A ripple of unease passed through the assembled buyers like wind through wheat. That kind of accusation, that kind of bone-deep confidence. It meant this stranger either knew something dangerous or was crazy enough to bluff with his life. "Matter of fact," the stranger continued, his voice growing louder, "I recognize a few faces here who've been making regular trips through our county. Funny how many young women have gone missing lately. Real funny coincidence." The murmur from the crowd grew uglier. Charlotte heard boots shuffling, men clearing throats nervously. Whoever this stranger was, he'd just turned a simple auction into something much more complicated. Finally, the auctioneer raised both hands in defeat. "Fine, fine. Take her then. But if you're lying, mister, I won't stop the sheriff from doing what needs doing." "Fair enough," the stranger said simply. Charlotte heard the soft jingle of coins as he reached into his coat pocket and tossed a handful at the auctioneer's feet. "Consider this my final bid, for her pain, her suffering, and the weeks you stole from our life." Then he was beside her, close enough that she could hear his steady breathing. He knelt down slowly, deliberately, and she felt the rope around her ankles fall away as his knife cut clean through the bindings. Blood rushed back into her feet like liquid fire. She swayed, nearly falling, but his hand steadied her elbow, gentle but firm. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly, his voice meant only for her ears. She swallowed hard, testing her voice after days of forced silence. "Yes." "Good." He didn't touch her beyond that steadying hand, just stepped aside and said, "Then let's go home, Charlotte." Her breath caught. He'd used her real name. In 3 weeks of captivity, no one had called her anything but girl or worse. The sound of her own name spoken with respect nearly broke her. They walked through the crowd like fire walking through dry grass. Men stepped aside, some glaring, others looking away in shame. Charlotte kept her chin up despite the sack still covering her head, despite the rope burns on her wrists, despite everything. At the edge of town, past the last fence post and away from watching eyes, he finally stopped. With careful hands, he pulled the burlap sack from her head. Light stabbed into her eyes like knives. She blinked hard, the world swimming back into focus through tears of pain and relief. When her vision cleared, she found herself looking at a man perhaps 30 years old, tall and lean, wearing a dusty brown coat and the kind of hat that spoke of long days under the sun. His face was weathered but kind, with blue eyes that held depths she couldn't immediately fathom. Most importantly, those eyes held no claim over her, no sense of ownership, just concern and something that might have been respect. "You lied," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded without shame. "Yes, I did." "Why?" He looked at her then, really seeing her for the first time. The bruises on her face, the rope burns on her wrists, the hollow look of someone who'd seen too much darkness. "Because I saw your hands shaking under that sack, but your knees never buckled, not once. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." "You don't know me," she whispered, still unable to believe this was real. "I don't need to know your history," he replied. "I just needed them to stop writing your future." The wind tugged at her torn sleeves, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. She wanted to collapse, to run, to disappear into the desert and never trust another human soul. But something in her chest, some part of her that had refused to break even in the darkest hours, stayed upright. This man had given her back her name when the world tried to strip it away. He'd called her wife, not to own her, but to free her. And in a place that had tried to sell her as nameless property, that was the first thing that truly felt like freedom. "What's your name?" she asked. "Sam Hayes," he said. "And before you ask, yes, I have a homestead. Yes, you're welcome there as long as you need. And no, I don't expect anything from you except maybe help with the chores when you're feeling stronger." Charlotte studied his face, looking for the lie, the trap, the hook that every man seemed to hide behind kindness. She found none of those things. What she found was something rarer than gold in her experience: simple, honest decency. "Why?" she asked one more time. Sam Hayes looked back toward the town, where the auction yard sat like a cancer in the desert heat. "Because when I was 12 years old, they took my sister, sold her just like they were about to sell you. I was too small then, too weak to stop it, but I swore in her memory that I'd never let it happen again if I had the power to prevent it." The pain in his voice cut deep, but it was clean pain, the kind that came from love rather than cruelty. "Did you ever find her?" He shook his head once, quick and final. "Number. But maybe I can help someone else's sister find her way home." Charlotte felt tears threatening again, but these were different tears than she'd cried in weeks of captivity. These came from gratitude so deep it felt like drowning in reverse. "I don't have a home to go back to," she admitted. "They burned it when they took me." "Then you can help me build a new one," Sam said simply. "If you want to." For the first time in longer than she could remember, Charlotte Reed smiled. It was a small smile, fragile as new growth after fire, but it was real. "I'd like that," she said. And together they walked away from Dust Haven toward whatever came next. Sam led her down a narrow trail that wound behind Dust Haven and into the open country beyond. The path was barely visible, marked more by the absence of sagebrush than any deliberate clearing. Charlotte walked beside him in comfortable silence, her feet finding their rhythm again after weeks of forced confinement. The late afternoon sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber. Rolling hills stretched in every direction, dotted with juniper and pine, rising toward distant mountains that looked purple in the haze. It was the kind of country that could break a person or heal them, depending on what they brought to it. After an hour of steady walking, Sam stopped beside a creek that bubbled over smooth stones, shaded by a grove of cottonwoods whose leaves whispered secrets to the wind. He knelt to fill his canteen from the clear water, then offered it to Charlotte without a word. She drank deeply, tasting nothing but clean water and possibility. When was the last time she'd had water that didn't taste of metal or fear? "You hungry?" Sam asked, pulling a cloth bundle from his saddlebag. Charlotte hesitated. In 3 weeks of captivity, food had been a weapon, given or withheld based on her behavior, her compliance, her willingness to stay broken. The idea of eating without earning it felt foreign, but her stomach answered before her mind could object, growling loud enough to make Sam smile slightly. He unwrapped 2 thick biscuits and handed her one without ceremony, as if sharing food with escaped captives was something he did every Tuesday. "Thank you," she said, then took a careful bite. It was good bread, real bread made by hands that cared about the result. She found herself eating faster than was ladylike, but Sam didn't seem to notice or care. "You got family somewhere?" he asked gently, settling back against a tree trunk. "People who might be looking for you?" Charlotte shook her head. Parents died of fever 2 years back, was living alone on their claim when... She trailed off, not ready to revisit that night when men with torches had appeared at her door. "Was managing fine by myself," she continued after a moment. "Had a small garden, few chickens, cow for milk. Wasn't much, but it was mine." Sam nodded thoughtfully. "Hard life for a woman alone out here." "Hard life for anyone," Charlotte replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "But it was my choice, my work, my success or failure." "What did you grow?" The question was so normal, so wonderfully ordinary, that Charlotte felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. Beans, corn, squash, tomatoes when the weather cooperated. Had an herb garden too, sage, thyme, mint by the creek. "Sounds like you know your way around a homestead." "Learned from my mother. She could make anything grow, even in bad soil." Charlotte smiled at the memory. Used to say plants were like people. Treat them with respect and patience. They'll flourish. Abuse them, and they'll die just to spite you. Sam laughed, a warm sound that made something flutter in Charlotte's chest. "Sounds like a wise woman." She was. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the creek and the evening songs of birds settling in for the night. Charlotte found herself studying Sam's profile in the fading light. His face was honest, weathered by sun and wind, but not hardened by cruelty. His hands wrapped around his own biscuit were working hands, scarred and calloused, but clean, gentle. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Sure. Back there at the auction, you knew my name. How?" Sam was quiet for so long that Charlotte wondered if he'd heard her. Then he said, "My sister's name was Charlotte too. Charlotte Marie Hayes. When I heard them call you that," he shrugged. "Seemed like a sign maybe. Or maybe I just wanted it to be." The pain in his voice was carefully controlled, but it was there. Charlotte recognized it. The kind of hurt that lives so deep you learn to carry it like part of your bones. "Tell me about her," she said softly. Sam's eyes found the water, watching it flow over stones worn smooth by time. "She was 2 years younger than me, smartest person I ever knew. Could read by the time she was 4, do sums in her head faster than most men could work them out on paper. Always asking questions, always wanting to know how things worked." He smiled, but it was a sad smile. "She used to follow me everywhere when we were small. Drive me crazy the way little sisters do. I'd try to lose her when I went fishing or hunting, but she always found me. Had this way of moving through the woods like she belonged there." "What happened?" "Raiders came through our county when I was 12. She was 10. Took girls and young women, left everyone else dead or wishing they were. I hid in the root cellar when I heard the shooting start, pulled Charlotte down with me. But when the screaming started..." Sam's jaw tightened. "She said she had to help. Said she couldn't hide while people were dying." Charlotte felt her heart clench. "She went back up. I tried to stop her, grabbed her arm, begged her not to go. But she was always braver than me, always sure she could fix things if she just tried hard enough." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I never saw her again." "I'm sorry," Charlotte said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. For years I told myself I should have held her down, tied her up if I had to. Should have been stronger, smarter, better. Sam looked at her then, his blue eyes holding depths of old pain and new determination. But I can't change what happened 12 years ago. All I can do is make sure it doesn't happen again when I have the power to stop it. They reached Sam's homestead just as the last light was fading from the western sky. The cabin sat in a natural clearing surrounded by tall pines, a modest structure but well built, with a stone chimney and windows that would let in morning light. A small barn stood nearby, and Charlotte could see the dark shapes of cattle moving in a fenced pasture beyond. "It's not much," Sam said, suddenly seeming self-conscious. "Built it myself after Charlotte disappeared. Thought maybe if she ever found her way back, she'd need a place to land." Charlotte looked at the cabin, at the neat split-rail fence, at the garden plot ready for spring planting. It wasn't grand, but it was real, solid, built by hands that cared about the result. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. Sam led her up the front steps to a covered porch furnished with two simple wooden chairs. He opened the door and stepped aside, letting her enter first. The main room was larger than it had looked from outside, with a stone fireplace taking up most of one wall and windows facing east to catch the morning sun. A kitchen area occupied one corner, complete with a cast-iron stove and a dry sink. A ladder led to what must be a sleeping loft above. Everything was clean and well-maintained, but Charlotte could see the loneliness in it too. One plate on the shelf, one cup, one chair at the small table. This was the home of a man who'd built for two but lived alone. "You can have the loft," Sam said, following her gaze upward. "I've been sleeping down here anyway. Easier to tend the fire." Charlotte felt tears threatening again. When was the last time someone had offered her privacy, safety, space to breathe without fear? "I don't want to put you out of your own bed," she said. "You're not putting me out of anything. The loft's got a good mattress, warm quilts, even a washstand. And—" He moved to a wooden chest near the ladder and opened it carefully. Inside, Charlotte glimpsed women's clothing, simple dresses, petticoats, a woolen shawl. "These were Charlotte's," Sam said quietly. "Been saving them, hoping for something that never came. But maybe they can serve a purpose now, help someone who needs them." Charlotte reached out to touch the fabric of a blue cotton dress. It was faded but well made, carefully mended in a few places. Someone had loved this dress, had worn it to church and social gatherings and ordinary Tuesdays. "I can't take your sister's things," she whispered. "She'd want them used," Sam said with quiet certainty. "Charlotte never could stand waste. Used to mend our socks until they were more thread than original fabric." He smiled sadly. She'd be happy knowing her dresses were keeping someone warm, helping someone start over. That night, Charlotte climbed to the loft feeling cleaner than she had in weeks. Sam had heated water for her to wash with, then discreetly made himself busy in the barn while she scrubbed away the grime and fear of captivity. She'd chosen the blue dress from the chest. It fit well enough, and wearing it felt like putting on possibility. Now she lay in a real bed with clean sheets and a window open to let in the night breeze. Outside, she could hear the peaceful sounds of Sam's homestead, cattle lowing softly, the hoot of an owl, the whisper of wind through pine needles. For the first time in 3 weeks, no one stood guard over her. No chains bound her wrists. No voice threatened her with worse treatment if she made a sound. She was free to think her own thoughts, plan her own dreams, imagine her own future. The realization hit her so hard she started crying, deep, silent sobs that shook her whole body. Not from sadness, but from relief so profound it felt like drowning in reverse. She was alive. She was safe. She was free. And tomorrow, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she would wake up and choose what to do with her day. From downstairs came the soft sounds of Sam banking the fire and settling in for the night. He'd given her everything: safety, shelter, privacy, hope, and asked for nothing in return except maybe help with chores when she felt stronger. Charlotte pulled the quilts up to her chin and closed her eyes. Outside, the wind sang lullabies through the pines, and for the first time in months, she felt truly safe enough to sleep. Charlotte woke to birdsong and golden sunlight streaming through the loft window. For a moment she lay still, listening to the sounds of a world waking peacefully around her. No shouts, no harsh voices, no jangle of keys or chains. Just the gentle lowing of cattle, the distant sound of an axe biting wood, and her own steady breathing. She dressed carefully in Charlotte Hayes's blue dress, braiding her hair with fingers that trembled only slightly. When she climbed down the ladder, she found the main room empty but warm, with banked coals glowing in the fireplace and the smell of coffee lingering in the air. A plate of biscuits sat on the table beside a jar of honey, and a note written in careful script. Gone to check the cattle. Back soon. Make yourself at home. S. Make yourself at home. 4 simple words that meant everything to someone who'd had no home for weeks. Charlotte poured herself coffee from the pot warming on the stove and stepped out onto the front porch. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of a warm day ahead. She could see Sam in the distance, moving among his small herd of cattle with the easy confidence of a man comfortable with his work. She was still standing there, coffee cup warming her hands when he started back toward the house. He moved with economical grace, wasting no motion, and she found herself studying the way he carried himself. Alert but not tense, confident but not arrogant. These were the movements of a man at peace with his place in the world. Sleep well? He asked as he approached the porch. Better than I have in... She paused, realizing she didn't want to count the weeks of captivity anymore. Better than I have in a long time. Sam nodded, removing his hat to run fingers through hair damp with morning sweat. Coffee's still warm if you want some. Already helped myself. Hope that's all right. That's what it's there for. He settled into one of the porch chairs with a slight grunt of satisfaction. Pretty morning. Beautiful, Charlotte agreed, meaning more than just the weather. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun climb higher and burn off the last wisps of morning mist. Charlotte found herself relaxing in a way she'd almost forgotten was possible. Muscles unclenching, shoulders dropping, breath coming deeper and easier. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Sure. Yesterday, when you saved me, she searched for the right words. You could have just paid for me and left it at that. Why the story about being married? Why make it complicated? Sam was quiet for a long moment, watching a hawk circle high overhead. Because if I'd just bought you, you'd still be property, just different property with a different owner. But a wife? He looked at her then, his blue eyes serious. A wife has rights, status, protection under law that a purchased woman doesn't have. Charlotte felt something shift in her chest, a puzzle piece clicking into place. You were protecting me from more than just that auction. Men like that, they don't just disappear because you buy their merchandise. They remember faces, hold grudges, come looking for what they think belongs to them. Sam's voice carried hard experience. But they think twice about messing with a married woman. Too many questions, too much attention from law. You thought that far ahead? In just those few minutes? Sam smiled slightly. Had to. Stakes were too high to improvise. Charlotte set down her coffee cup and really looked at him. This man who'd risked everything for a stranger, who'd thought 3 moves ahead while she was still trying to understand what was happening. Thank you, she said simply. You already thanked me. Not enough. Not nearly enough. After breakfast, Sam asked if she wanted to see the rest of the homestead. Charlotte found herself nodding eagerly, partly from curiosity, but mostly because she wanted to understand this place that felt safer than anywhere she'd been in months. The tour started with the barn, a sturdy structure that housed Sam's horse, a milk cow, and a handful of chickens. Everything was clean and well organized, tools hanging in their proper places, feed stored in tight barrels to keep out mice and weather. You keep a neat place, Charlotte observed. Habit from the army, Sam said, then seemed surprised he'd mentioned it. You were a soldier? Few years after Charlotte disappeared. Seemed like the thing to do. Learn to fight, maybe find her trail. His expression darkened briefly. Didn't work out the way I planned. Charlotte sensed there was more to that story, but she didn't push. Everyone had their tender places, their memories too painful for casual conversation. The garden plot was modest but well planned, with good soil and convenient access to water from a nearby spring. Charlotte knelt to examine the earth, letting it run through her fingers. "Soil's good," she said. "Rich. You could grow almost anything here." "I stick to basics mostly. Beans, corn, potatoes. Don't have much talent for the finer points of gardening." Charlotte looked up at him, shading her eyes against the sun. "I do. If you want help with it, I mean." Something lit up in Sam's face. Hope, maybe, or just pleasure at the thought of sharing the work. "I'd like that. Been thinking about expanding it anyway. Maybe trying some vegetables I don't know much about." They spent the rest of the morning walking the property boundaries, Sam pointing out landmarks and explaining his plans for improvements. He wanted to expand the pasture, maybe add a few more cattle next year. There was a good spot for a bigger garden closer to the spring. The barn could use a new roof before winter. Charlotte found herself making suggestions, offering ideas based on her experience helping her parents build their homestead. Sam listened to everything she said, asking thoughtful questions, treating her knowledge with respect that felt almost foreign after weeks of being treated like cargo. "You know a lot about homesteading," he said as they headed back toward the house. "Had good teachers," Charlotte replied. "My parents came out here with nothing but determination and a wagon full of hope. Learned everything the hard way, then made sure I learned it the easier way. Must have been good people. The best." Charlotte felt the familiar ache of missing them, but it was clean pain now. Grief for love lost rather than despair at being alone. "They'd like this place. Would have liked you, I think." That afternoon, Sam announced he needed to split wood for the winter supply. Charlotte watched him work for a while, admiring the efficient rhythm of his axe, the way he made hard labor look almost graceful. "Can I help?" she asked finally. Sam paused mid-swing and looked at her with surprise. "You don't need to do that. You're still recovering." "I'm fine," Charlotte said, and realized it was almost true. "And I need to feel useful." Sam studied her face for a moment, then nodded toward a smaller hatchet leaning against the woodpile. "Think you can handle splitting kindling?" It wasn't easy. Her arms trembled from weeks of forced inactivity. Her palms burned from the unaccustomed work. But each crack of wood felt like a declaration of independence. Each piece split a step further away from the helpless girl who'd stood on that auction block. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, the afternoon sun warm on their shoulders. Charlotte found herself stealing glances at Sam, noting the way concentration creased his forehead, the careful precision of his movements, the fact that he never once suggested she should rest or stop. He was treating her like an equal, like a partner, like someone whose contribution mattered. The realization hit her like physical blow. When was the last time she'd felt truly useful? Not tolerated, not protected, not pitied, but genuinely helpful? "You all right?" Sam asked, noticing she'd stopped working. "Yes," Charlotte said, and meant it more than she'd meant anything in a long time. "I'm all right." That evening they sat on the porch again, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Charlotte's hands were blistered from the hatchet work. Her back ached from bending over the kindling pile, and she'd never felt better in her life. "Thank you," she said into the comfortable darkness. "For what now?" "For letting me help. For not treating me like I'm made of glass." Sam was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "My sister used to hate it when people tried to protect her from doing real work. Said it made her feel useless, like decorating instead of living." "She sounds like she was quite a woman." "She would have been," Sam said sadly. "Would have been something special." Charlotte looked out at the peaceful homestead, at the life Sam had built from his grief and determination. "I think she would have been proud of what you've made here." "I hope so," Sam said softly. "I really hope so." Later, as Charlotte climbed to the loft for her second night of freedom, she paused to look out the window at the star-filled sky. Somewhere out there were the men who'd taken her, probably looking for their next victim. Somewhere were the buyers from today's auction, angry at being cheated out of their purchase. But here, in this cabin built by a good man's grief and hope, she was safe. More than safe, she was home. For the first time since her parents died, Charlotte Reed felt like she belonged somewhere, and tomorrow she would wake up and choose what to do with another day of freedom. The thought was so wonderful it brought tears to her eyes. But these were good tears, the kind that came from gratitude too deep for words. Outside, the wind sang lullabies through the pines, and Charlotte fell asleep planning all the ways she could help make this place even better. 2 weeks into her new life at the Hayes homestead, Charlotte woke one morning to the sound of a horse approaching at speed. She'd grown accustomed to the peaceful rhythms of the place, Sam's early rising, the gentle sounds of cattle and chickens, the whisper of wind through pine needles. This was different, urgent. She dressed quickly in one of Charlotte Hayes's practical work dresses and climbed down from the loft to find Sam already at the window, his face grim as he watched the approaching rider. "You recognize him?" she asked, joining him at the window. "No," Sam said, but his hand had moved instinctively to rest on the rifle mounted above the fireplace. "But he's riding like he's got purpose." The rider was young, maybe 25, dressed too fine for honest work on the frontier. His horse was good quality, his saddle expensive, his clothes clean despite the dust of travel. Everything about him spoke of money and position, and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He reined in his mount just outside the fence, making a show of looking around the homestead with calculating eyes before dismounting and approaching the front porch. "Morning," he called out, his voice carrying the lazy arrogance of someone accustomed to deference. "This the Hayes place?" Sam opened the door and stepped out onto the porch, leaving Charlotte just inside but within earshot. "That depends on who's asking." The young man smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. "Name's Marcus Briggs. I represent certain business interests in the territory." Charlotte felt ice form in her stomach. She'd heard that name before, whispered in the darkness of the wagon that had carried her to auction. Marcus Briggs, son of the man who'd organized the raid on her homestead, heir to a network of human trafficking that stretched across 3 territories. "What kind of business?" Sam asked, his tone carefully neutral. "The kind that involves recovering stolen property," Briggs said, his smile growing wider and more unpleasant. "See, there was a girl sold at auction in Dust Haven a couple weeks back. Young woman, brown hair, about yay high." He gestured vaguely. "Word is she left with a man claiming to be her husband. Lots of married couples in these parts," Sam said mildly. "Thing is," Briggs continued, stepping closer to the porch, "my associates have reason to believe this particular marriage might not be entirely legitimate, and that the woman in question might be here, on your property." Charlotte's hands clenched into fists. Through the window, she could see Sam's shoulders tense, though his voice remained calm. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Briggs." "Oh, it's more than an accusation." Briggs reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "I've got a bill of sale right here, signed and witnessed. Says my associates own one Charlotte Reed, purchased fair and square from the men who captured her." The use of her full name hit Charlotte like a physical blow. They knew exactly who she was, where she'd come from, probably every detail of the night they'd burned her parents' homestead and dragged her away. "Funny thing about bills of sale," Sam said, still standing relaxed on the porch. "Paper's only as good as the men who sign it. And from what I hear, there's been a lot of forged documents floating around lately." Briggs's smile faltered slightly. "You calling my associates liars?" "I'm saying a man can write anything on a piece of paper. Doesn't make it true." Charlotte made a decision that surprised her with its suddenness and certainty. She stepped out onto the porch, moving to stand beside Sam. Not behind him, not protected by him, but next to him as an equal. Briggs's eyes lit up with recognition and triumph. "Well, well, Charlotte Reed herself. You've caused my family a considerable amount of trouble, girl." "Good," Charlotte said, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "I hope it was expensive trouble." Briggs laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, you've got some spirit left. That's good. Some buyers prefer their merchandise with a little fight in them." "I'm not merchandise," Charlotte said quietly, but her words carried across the yard like a declaration of war. "And I don't belong to your family or anyone else." "See, that's where you're wrong." Briggs unfolded his paper with theatrical flourish. "According to this legal document—" "According to that paper," Sam interrupted, "you're confessing to participating in human trafficking, which became a federal crime last month, in case you haven't heard." Briggs's confident expression flickered. "What are you talking about?" "New territorial law," Sam said with perfect calm. Passed 3 weeks ago, went into effect immediately. Anyone caught buying, selling, or transporting human beings for forced labor faces 20 years in federal prison. No exceptions, no pardons. It was a complete bluff. Charlotte could tell from the slight tension in Sam's shoulders. But it was delivered with such conviction that even she almost believed it. Briggs's face had gone pale beneath his tan. You're lying. Am I? Sam reached into his own coat and pulled out what looked like an official document. Got the notice right here from the territorial marshal. Been posted in every town from here to Denver. Funny thing is, they're offering rewards for information leading to arrests. Big rewards. Charlotte watched Briggs's eyes dart between Sam's face and the paper in his hand. The young man was clearly trying to calculate odds, weigh risks, decide whether this was a bluff worth calling. Even if that's true, Briggs said finally, it doesn't change the fact that she was legally purchased before any law changed. Legally purchased? Charlotte stepped forward, and something in her movement made Briggs instinctively step back. From men who murdered my parents and burned my home? That's your definition of legal? I don't know anything about your parents, Briggs said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Of course you don't, Charlotte said, her anger building like steam in a kettle. You just take delivery of the merchandise, no questions asked, don't want to know about the families destroyed, the lives ruined, the women who die fighting back. Now see here. No, you see here, Charlotte interrupted, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. I know who you are, Marcus Briggs. I know your family's business, know how many women have disappeared because of your associates. And I know that bill of sale in your hand is signed with blood. Briggs's hand moved toward his gun, but Sam was faster. Not drawing, just shifting his weight in a way that made it clear he was ready for whatever came next. I wouldn't, Sam said quietly. Like I mentioned, there are federal rewards involved now. A lot of people would be very interested to hear about a conversation like this one. For a long moment, the three of them stood frozen in a tableau of tension. Then Briggs seemed to deflate slightly, his hand moving away from his weapon. This isn't over, he said, trying to salvage some dignity from the encounter. Yes, it is, Charlotte said with quiet certainty. It's been over since the moment I walked off that auction block. You just haven't figured that out yet. Briggs mounted his horse with sharp, angry movements. You think that farmer can protect you forever? My family has long arms and longer memories. I don't need protection, Charlotte replied. I have something better. What's that? The truth. And people who listen to it. After Briggs had ridden away, raising a dust cloud that hung in the still air like a bad omen, Charlotte and Sam stood on the porch in silence. Charlotte's hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the aftershock of confrontation, the adrenaline of standing up to the very forces that had tried to destroy her. You handled that well, Sam said finally. Did I? Charlotte looked down at her trembling hands. I feel like I might fall over. But you didn't fall over when it mattered. That's what counts. Sam was right, she realized. When Briggs had been standing there with his threats and his paper and his casual assumption that she could be bought and sold like livestock, she hadn't cowered. She hadn't hidden behind Sam or begged for protection. She'd stood her ground and spoken her truth. Was any of that real, she asked, about the federal law? Sam smiled grimly. Not a word of it, but he didn't know that. And the paper you showed him, land deed for this property, figured he wouldn't get close enough to read the details. Charlotte stared at him. You were completely bluffing. Sometimes a good bluff is all you have. The trick is selling it with enough confidence that the other person doesn't want to find out if you're telling the truth. What if he'd called your bluff? What if he'd tried to take me by force? Sam's expression hardened. Then we'd have found out how serious I am about protecting people under my roof. The way he said it made Charlotte believe that Marcus Briggs had been very wise not to push the confrontation further. That evening, they worked together to reinforce the cabin's defenses. Sam showed Charlotte how to bar the doors and windows from inside, where he kept the extra ammunition, how to load and fire the rifle if necessary. He did it all matter-of-factly, like teaching someone to milk a cow or split kindling. You think he'll come back? Charlotte asked as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Maybe. Men like that don't like being told no. Sam was cleaning his rifle, movements automatic and practiced. But I don't think he'll come alone next time, and I don't think he'll come here directly. What do you mean? Briggs struck me as someone who fights with other people's fists. He'll send men he can afford to lose before he risks himself again. The thought should have terrified Charlotte, but instead she felt something else entirely, a cold, hard determination. She'd stood up to Marcus Briggs today. She'd looked him in the eye and refused to be intimidated. Whatever came next, she would face it the same way. Sam, she said quietly. Yeah, thank you for standing with me today. Not in front of me, not behind me, with me. Sam looked at her in the fading light, and she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Respect, admiration, maybe something deeper than either of those things. You didn't need much standing with, he said. You were magnificent. Charlotte felt warmth spread through her chest, not the desperate gratitude she'd felt after her rescue, but something stronger and more lasting. Pride, in herself, in what she'd become, in the woman who'd found her voice in the worst possible circumstances and refused to let anyone take it away again. I'm not the same person who stood on that auction block, she said almost to herself. No, Sam agreed. You're not. That woman was surviving. This woman is living. As the stars emerged overhead and the peaceful sounds of the homestead settled around them, Charlotte realized that Marcus Briggs had done her an unexpected favor. His threats, his casual cruelty, his assumption that she could still be intimidated, all of it had shown her how far she'd come. She was no longer afraid. She was no longer helpless. She was Charlotte Reed, and she belonged to no one but herself. And if Marcus Briggs or anyone else wanted to test that truth, they were welcome to try. 3 weeks after Marcus Briggs's visit, Charlotte stood in front of her small mirror in the loft, braiding her hair with steady hands. Today marked her first return to Dust Haven since the auction, not because she had to, but because she chose to. The distinction meant everything. She dressed carefully in one of Charlotte Hayes's better dresses, a deep green cotton that brought out her eyes and fit her newly strong frame well. The silver comb Sam had given her caught the morning light as she tucked it behind her ear, not hidden away, but displayed proudly. Sam was waiting by the wagon when she came downstairs, but he didn't hover or fuss. He simply nodded approvingly and said, "Ready?" "Ready," Charlotte replied, and meant it. The ride to town passed in comfortable conversation about practical things. What supplies they needed, whether the weather would hold for the harvest, plans for expanding the garden next spring. Normal talk between partners, Charlotte realized with a warm glow of satisfaction. When had she started thinking of them as partners? Dust Haven looked smaller in the morning light than it had in her memory. The auction platform still stood in the town square, but it seemed diminished somehow, like a monster that had lost its teeth. Charlotte looked at it directly as they passed, feeling nothing but mild contempt for the piece of wood that had once represented her worst nightmare. "You all right?" Sam asked, noticing her attention. "Fine," Charlotte said, and it was true. Just thinking how different things look when you're not afraid. At Miller's General Store, conversations paused when they entered, but not the way they had weeks ago. Then people had stared at her with pity or curiosity or barely concealed disgust. Now they looked with something that might have been respect. Word had gotten around about her confrontation with Marcus Briggs, apparently, and the fact that she'd stood her ground. Mrs. Miller served them with more warmth than she'd shown before, actually making conversation about the weather and asking after Sam's cattle. When Charlotte requested thread and fabric for new curtains, the older woman showed her the finest goods in the store without being asked. "That green would look lovely in your front room," Mrs. Miller said, holding up a bolt of cheerful calico. "Bring out the color of your eyes." The casual kindness of it, being treated like a woman with a home worth decorating, made Charlotte's throat tight with gratitude. They were loading their purchases into the wagon when the commotion started. Raised voices from the direction of the hotel, then the sound of someone crying. Charlotte and Sam exchanged glances before walking toward the disturbance. A small crowd had gathered around a girl who couldn't have been more than 16, sitting on the hotel steps with tears streaming down her face. Her dress was torn, her hair disheveled, and there were bruises on her arms that spoke of rough handling. Standing over her was a man Charlotte recognized from the auction, one of the buyers who'd bid on her before Sam's intervention. He was gesturing angrily while the girl huddled smaller and smaller. "Paid good money for you, and by God, you'll earn it back or wish you had," the man was saying. "Now get up and stop this foolishness before I really give you something to cry about." The girl shook her head mutely, wrapping her arms around herself in a gesture Charlotte recognized all too well. The defensive posture of someone who'd learned that making herself smaller sometimes made the blows hurt less. "Is there a problem here?" Sam's voice cut through the man's bluster like a blade. The man turned, his face flushed with anger and drink. "Ain't no problem that concerns you, Hayes. Just dealing with some unruly property." "Property?" Charlotte stepped forward, and something in her tone made the gathered crowd shift nervously. "That's a young woman, not property." "She's what I paid for," the man snapped, "and I'll handle my business however I see fit." "No," Charlotte said simply. "You won't." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Charlotte could feel the crowd's attention focusing on her, could sense Sam tensing beside her, ready to back whatever play she was about to make. "What did you say to me?" the man demanded. "I said no." Charlotte's voice carried clearly across the square. "You won't handle her however you see fit, because she's not yours to handle." She knelt beside the frightened girl, ignoring the man's sputtered protests. "What's your name, honey?" "Emma," the girl whispered. "Emma Collins." "Emma, I'm Charlotte. Do you want to leave with this man?" Emma's eyes went wide with surprise, as if the idea that she had a choice had never occurred to her. She glanced fearfully at the man, then back at Charlotte. I don't know," she stammered. "He says he owns me. Says I have to." "He's lying," Charlotte said gently but firmly. "Nobody owns you. The only person who gets to decide what you do is you. Now you listen here." The man started forward, but Sam stepped between them. "I think you've said enough," Sam said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made the man stop dead. "So what's it going to be, Emma?" Charlotte asked, keeping her attention on the girl. "Do you want to go with him, or do you want to come home with us?" Emma looked at Charlotte with desperate hope. "I can do that? Really? Really? But he paid. He paid for the privilege of being told no," Charlotte said, standing and facing the crowd that had gathered. "Just like every other man who thinks women are something to be bought and sold." The man's face was purple with rage now. "You can't just steal my property. I have rights." "You have the right to leave town," the deputy sheriff said, materializing from the crowd with his hand resting on his gun. "Before I find a reason to arrest you for disturbing the peace." Charlotte hadn't seen the lawman approach, but she was grateful for his intervention. More importantly, she was grateful for the message it sent. The law was starting to side with the women being sold rather than the men doing the buying. The man left with a string of curses and threats, but he left. Emma sat in the back of Sam's wagon between Charlotte and a sack of flour, staring around at the world like someone seeing daylight for the first time. "Where will I go?" she asked as they drove out of town. "I don't have anywhere." "You have somewhere now," Charlotte said simply. "We've got room, and we can always use help with the work." Sam caught Charlotte's eye over Emma's head and nodded slightly. They'd discuss the practical details later, but they were in agreement about the important thing. This girl needed sanctuary, and they could provide it. That night, after Emma had been fed, bathed, and settled in a makeshift bed in the main room, Charlotte and Sam sat on the porch talking quietly. "Word's going to spread about what happened today," Sam said. "Good," Charlotte replied. "Let it spread. Let every woman in 3 territories know that there's a place they can come if they need help finding their own voices." "Could get complicated. More mouths to feed, more danger from men like Briggs who won't like what we're doing." Charlotte was quiet for a moment, thinking about the look of hope in Emma's eyes when she'd realized she had a choice. "Some things are worth the complication." Sam smiled in the darkness. "My sister would have said the same thing." "Maybe that's why I'm here," Charlotte said softly. "Maybe this is how Charlotte Hayes finally comes home." Over the following weeks, word did spread. First came Mary, a woman in her 20s who'd escaped from a marriage arranged by men who'd bought her from raiders. Then Grace, barely 18, who'd been sold by her own uncle to pay gambling debts. Each woman who arrived brought her own story of survival, her own scars, her own fierce determination to never be powerless again. Charlotte helped each one find her voice, taught them the lessons she'd learned herself. Your worth isn't determined by what was done to you, but by what you choose to do next. Sam expanded the cabin, adding rooms and building a second structure to house their growing community. He never complained about the extra work or expense, never suggested that Charlotte was taking on too much. He simply saw what needed doing and did it, the way he'd done everything since the day he'd claimed her as his wife to save her from the auction block. By autumn, the Hayes homestead had become something unprecedented in the territory, a place where women could go to remember their own names, to learn their own worth, to choose their own futures. And Charlotte Reed, who had once stood on an auction block with a sack over her head, had become the woman who helped other women stand up and refuse to be sold. The cycle was breaking, one choice at a time. Winter came early that year, blanketing the Hayes homestead in snow that turned the world clean and white. Inside the expanded cabin, 5 women worked together to prepare for the long months ahead, preserving food, mending clothes, and sharing the kind of easy companionship that came from mutual respect and shared purpose. Charlotte stood at the kitchen window, watching Sam split wood in the yard with the steady rhythm she'd come to love. In the months since Emma's arrival, 3 more women had found their way to the homestead. Mary, who'd escaped an arranged marriage, Grace, sold by her uncle, and Sarah, who'd been taken during a raid on her family's farm. Each had brought her own skills, her own strength, her own determination to never be powerless again. Hard to believe it's only been 6 months, Emma said, joining Charlotte at the window. The girl had grown in confidence and health since that day in Dust Haven, her shoulders straighter, her voice stronger. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, Charlotte agreed. Other times it feels like yesterday. Do you ever regret it? Emma asked quietly. Taking us all in, I mean. It can't be easy, feeding this many people, dealing with all our different troubles. Charlotte turned from the window to look at the young woman who'd become like a sister to her. Emma was helping Mary card wool for spinning, their conversation punctuated by quiet laughter. Grace was reading aloud from a book Sam had brought from town, her voice gaining confidence with each page. Sarah was working on a quilt, her needle moving in sure, steady strokes. Never, Charlotte said firmly. This is what homes are supposed to feel like. That afternoon brought unexpected visitors. Charlotte was hanging laundry despite the cold when she spotted a small group approaching on horseback. 3 women and 2 children, their clothes worn, their faces carrying the particular exhaustion that came from running with no clear destination. Sam, Charlotte called, and he emerged from the barn immediately, his hand moving instinctively toward the rifle he always kept close. But as the group drew nearer, it became clear they posed no threat. The lead rider was a woman perhaps 30 years old, with graying brown hair and eyes that held both determination and desperation. Behind her rode 2 younger women, one carrying a baby, the other leading a horse with a boy of maybe 8 clinging to its back. You Charlotte Reed? The older woman called out as they approached the fence. I am, Charlotte replied, walking to meet them. I'm Helen Marsh. We heard, that is, someone told us. She paused, seeming to gather her courage. We heard there might be a place here for women with nowhere else to go. Charlotte's heart clenched at the hope and fear warring in the woman's voice. There is. There always is. The relief that washed over Helen's face was painful to witness. We've been traveling for 2 weeks. My daughters and I, we escaped from a situation, but we don't have anywhere to go. No family left. You have family now, Charlotte said simply. Come on up to the house. We'll get you fed and warm, and you can tell us whatever you want to tell us when you're ready. That evening, the expanded cabin felt even more like home, as 9 women and 2 children shared a meal around the long table Sam had built to accommodate their growing family. Helen's story came out slowly. A husband who died leaving debts, creditors who decided the widow and her daughters could pay those debts in ways that had nothing to do with money. We just ran, Helen finished quietly. Took what we could carry and ran in the middle of the night. But we didn't have a plan beyond getting away. Running was the plan, Charlotte said. Everything else we can figure out together. As winter deepened, the women of the Hayes homestead developed routines that spoke of permanence and purpose. They took turns cooking, cleaning, and caring for the children. They taught each other skills. Helen knew fine needlework. Mary was an expert with herbal remedies. Grace could read and write well enough to keep accounts. Charlotte found herself becoming something she'd never expected, a leader, not through force or manipulation, but through the simple act of listening when others spoke, sharing what she'd learned, and standing firm when someone needed support. The real test came in February, when Marcus Briggs returned, not alone this time, but with 3 armed men in a document he claimed gave him legal authority to search the property for stolen goods. Charlotte faced them from the front porch, flanked by Sam and with the other women standing behind her. She wasn't hiding anymore, wasn't hoping someone else would fight her battles. "Mr. Briggs," she said calmly. "Back again?" "With proper authority this time," Briggs replied, waving his paper. "I have a warrant to search these premises for stolen property, specifically several young women who were legally purchased and have since been unlawfully harbored." "Let me see that warrant," Sam said, stepping forward. While Sam examined the document, Charlotte studied the men Briggs had brought with him. They were clearly hired guns, the kind of men who fought for money rather than principle. Dangerous but not necessarily committed to their employer's cause. "This warrant is signed by Judge Morrison in Cedar Creek," Sam said finally. "Funny thing about Judge Morrison, he was arrested 3 weeks ago for taking bribes. Federal marshals found evidence he'd been selling legal documents to the highest bidder. It was another bluff, but delivered with such conviction that one of Briggs's men shifted nervously in his saddle. "Even if that were true," Briggs said, though he sounded less certain than before, "I have other legal remedies available." "Such as?" Charlotte asked. "Citizen's arrest, recovery of stolen property, protection of lawful commerce." "Whose property?" Emma asked, stepping forward from behind Charlotte. "I was never anybody's property." "Neither was I," Mary added, joining Emma. One by one, the women of the homestead moved to stand beside Charlotte, presenting a united front that was more powerful than any legal document. "These women chose to be here," Charlotte said quietly. "They weren't stolen. They weren't coerced. They weren't harbored against their will. They exercised the most basic human right there is, the right to choose their own lives. You're interfering with lawful business relationships." "There's nothing lawful about buying and selling human beings," Charlotte interrupted, "and there never was, no matter what papers you wave around." The confrontation might have escalated from there, but it was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. A group of riders crested the hill behind Briggs's men. 6 federal marshals in official uniforms, led by a man with a silver star and the kind of presence that commanded immediate attention. "Marshal Thompson," Sam called out, and Charlotte could hear the relief in his voice. "Good timing." "Mr. Hayes," the marshal replied, dismounting and approaching the porch. "Got your message. Came as soon as we could." Charlotte glanced at Sam, who shrugged slightly. Apparently, he'd been more prepared for this confrontation than he'd let on. Marshal Thompson turned his attention to Briggs. "You Marcus Briggs?" "I am, and I have legal authority." "No, you don't," the marshal said flatly. "Territory passed new laws last month, making human trafficking a federal crime, retroactive to cover any ongoing cases. That paper you're holding isn't worth the ink it's printed with." Briggs's face went white. "You can't just change the law retroactively." "Actually, we can," Marshal Thompson said, "especially when the original transactions were based on fraud, coercion, and violence, which, according to our investigation, covers every case you and your associates have been involved in." The marshal's men had quietly surrounded Briggs's group during this conversation. Now Thompson pulled out a set of manacles. "Marcus Briggs, you're under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy, and operating a criminal enterprise across territorial lines." As the marshals led Briggs and his men away, Charlotte felt something she hadn't experienced since the day Sam claimed her at the auction. The profound relief of knowing that justice was possible, that the law could protect the innocent instead of enabling the guilty. "How did you know to contact them?" she asked Sam as they watched the riders disappear over the hill. "Been corresponding with Marshal Thompson for months," Sam admitted, "ever since that first visit from Briggs. Figured it was only a matter of time before this came to a head, and when it did, I wanted the law on our side." That night, the women of the Hayes homestead celebrated around their table, not just the end of Marcus Briggs's threat, but the beginning of something larger. Word would spread about what had happened here, about the federal government's commitment to ending human trafficking, about places where women could go to reclaim their lives. "You know what this means?" Helen asked as they shared a bottle of wine Sam had been saving for a special occasion. "What?" Charlotte asked. "It means we're not just hiding anymore. We're not just surviving. We're part of something that's actually changing the world." Charlotte looked around the table at the faces of women who'd found their strength, their voices, their worth. Each one had arrived broken and afraid. Each one had chosen to rebuild herself into something stronger. "My parents used to say that change starts with one person refusing to accept the way things are," Charlotte said. "But I think it really starts with one person helping another person remember what they're worth." Spring came late but brilliant that year, covering the homestead in wildflowers and new growth. Charlotte stood in the expanded garden, watching Emma teach little Tommy Marsh how to plant seeds while his mother Helen worked nearby. The sight filled her with a contentment so deep it felt like coming home to herself. Sam approached from the barn, carrying a piece of wood that gleamed with fresh varnish. "Finished it," he said, holding up what was clearly a sign. Charlotte read the carefully carved letters aloud. "Hayes Home, where women choose themselves." "It's perfect," she said, meaning more than just the sign. "Thought we'd hang it by the front gate," Sam said. "Let people know what they'll find here." As they walked toward the house together, Charlotte reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she'd been a nameless woman on an auction block, covered by a sack, waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. Today, she was Charlotte Reed, leader of a community that had become a beacon of hope for women across 3 territories. The change hadn't happened overnight. It had taken courage, not just her own, but the collective courage of every woman who'd chosen to trust in the possibility of something better. It had taken the support of a good man who'd seen her worth when she'd forgotten it herself. Most of all, it had taken the willingness to believe that the past didn't have to define the future. "Sam," she said as they reached the front porch. "Yeah? Thank you. For everything. For saving me. For supporting me. For helping me remember who I could be." Sam smiled. The warm, genuine smile she'd come to treasure. "You saved yourself, Charlotte. I just happened to be there when you needed a witness." That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains and painted the sky in shades of gold and purple, Charlotte sat on the porch with her chosen family around her. The sound of women's voices filled the air, planning, dreaming, laughing, the sound of children playing, the sound of home. Someone had asked her once what she wanted more than anything in the world. Now she knew the answer. She wanted exactly this: a place where broken things could be mended, where lost women could find themselves, where the past was acknowledged but didn't have to be a prison. She wanted to be exactly who she'd become: Charlotte Reed, the woman who chose herself and then helped others do the same. Years later, when they told her story, they wouldn't start with the auction block or the sack over her head. They'd start with the moment she said, "Yes, I'm his," and chose freedom over safety. They'd tell about the woman who turned her own healing into a pathway for others, who proved that broken didn't mean worthless, that survival could become triumph. They'd say she was the woman who stood up when the world tried to keep her down, who found her voice in the worst possible circumstances and used it to free others, who proved that the most powerful force in the world wasn't money or violence or legal documents. It was the simple refusal to let anyone else define your worth. Some stories end with happily ever after. Charlotte's story ended with something better: happily ever after herself and everyone brave enough to follow her example. The camera pulls back slowly from the Hayes homestead as golden sunset light filters through the cottonwoods. Charlotte stands on the porch, the silver comb Sam gave her gleaming in her hair, watching new arrivals walk up the dusty trail toward the house. Behind her, warm light spills from the windows, and the sound of women's voices mingles with children's laughter and Sam's quiet contentment. The new sign by the gate catches the last rays of sun: Hayes Home, where women choose themselves. A gentle wind moves through the trees, carrying with it the echo of words that changed everything. I am his, becoming I am mine, becoming we are ours. This is Charlotte's story, but it's more than that. It's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, when the world seems determined to break us down and strip away everything that makes us who we are, we carry within us an unbreakable power, the power to choose who we become. Charlotte's journey from auction block to freedom didn't happen overnight. It happened one brave choice at a time, one moment of refusing to accept what others said she was worth, one day of deciding that her past didn't have to define her future. But most importantly, it happened because she found the courage to help others discover their own worth. What moment in your own life marked the turning point between who you were and who you chose to become? Have you ever found strength you didn't know you had? Have you ever stood up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves? Or helped someone remember their own value when the world tried to make them forget it? We all have moments when we have to choose between staying safe and standing up, between accepting what is and fighting for what should be. Charlotte chose to fight, and in fighting for herself, she showed others how to fight for themselves too. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Whether you're in a bustling city where it's easy to feel lost, or a quiet small town where everyone knows your story, or anywhere in between. Tell us about a time when you chose courage over comfort, when you decided your worth wasn't up for negotiation. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Charlotte's journey and how it connects to your own story of choosing yourself. The screen fades to black as the last light disappears behind the mountains, leaving only stars and the warm glow from the windows of a house that became a home, a sanctuary that became a movement, a woman's choice that became a legacy. Hit that subscribe button for more stories of courage, redemption, and the unbreakable human spirit. Because the best stories aren't just about the characters on screen, they're about the heroes watching them. The people who choose every day to be brave, to be kind, to be themselves no matter what the world tells them they should be. From all of us here in the Wild West, remember, you are never too broken to rebuild yourself stronger, never too lost to find your way home, and never too powerless to choose who you become. Keep choosing yourself and help others choose themselves too. Until next time, may your choices be brave and your courage be contagious.